Studio lights blazed down as millions tuned in for what was supposed to be a smooth, thoughtful segment. Oprah Winfrey leaned forward in her chair, her tone sharpening as she turned to Representative Jasmine Crockett. What started as a polite discussion quickly took a dramatic turn. Oprah accused Crockett of being too aggressive in her political style, suggesting she was more focused on soundbites than real solutions. The audience gasped, sensing tension ripple through the set. Crockett didn't flinch. She sat back with calm confidence, letting Oprah's words hang in the air. Then, with perfect timing, she leaned toward her mic and delivered her clapback. "Oprah, I didn't come here to make people comfortable. I came here to tell the truth. And if the truth feels sharp, maybe it's because it's cutting through the noise." The studio fell silent. Even Oprah, usually unshakable, looked momentarily stunned. Crockett's words weren't just a rebuttal, they were a statement of authority. She turned to the crowd and added, "People aren't tired of passion. They're tired of polished speeches that say nothing. My job isn't to coddle power, it's to hold it accountable." The audience erupted in applause, some even standing on their feet. Cameras zoomed in on Oprah, who forced a smile but was visibly caught off guard. Social media lit up instantly. Clips of Crockett's response spread across platforms within minutes. Hashtags trended, headlines exploded, Crockett silences Oprah with one line. By the end of the night, it was clear who owned the moment. Crockett had turned an attempted takedown into one of the most viral political clapbacks of the year. Oprah's challenge had backfired, and the world watched as Crockett walked away with the momentum, her voice echoing far beyond the studio walls. Oprah adjusted herself in her seat, clearly trying to regain control of the conversation. She wasn't used to being silenced on her own platform. With a measured smile, she leaned forward again and tried to steer the narrative back her way. "Jasmine," Oprah said, her voice steady, "people admire passion, but there's a difference between passion and confrontation. Don't you think your style turns away the very voters you need to persuade?" The audience hummed with curiosity, waiting to see how Crockett would handle this follow-up. Some even thought Oprah had landed a fair point, this could have been her chance to put Crockett back on the defensive. But Crockett didn't break. She clasped her hands together, leaned closer to the mic, and delivered her response with precision. "Oprah, confrontation isn't the problem. The problem is that too many politicians smile politely while ignoring the issues. If telling the truth out loud makes people uncomfortable, then maybe it's time we all start feeling a little uncomfortable. Because comfort has never solved anything, action has." The crowd exploded again, louder than before. People in the studio clapped, shouted, and even whistled. Oprah's eyebrows arched as the reaction slipped beyond her control. Crockett then looked directly at Oprah, her tone softening but her words striking even harder. "You've built a career on giving people a voice, Oprah. That's all I'm doing, for those who've been silenced too long." The studio erupted in a standing ovation. Cameras caught Oprah blinking, her practiced composure cracking just enough for everyone at home to see. The ovation seemed to last forever, but when the applause finally died down, Oprah tightened her grip on the cards in her hand. She wasn't going to let the moment slip completely. She straightened her posture, her tone now carrying a hint of edge. "Jasmine," Oprah began, "it's easy to criticize. But when you stand in front of the American people, you owe them more than sharp words. Where are your solutions? What makes you any different from the countless others who promise change but deliver nothing?" The room went quiet again. This was Oprah's classic move. She had shifted the conversation from tone to substance, a place where many politicians stumbled. The cameras zoomed in on Crockett, waiting to see if she would falter. But Crockett didn't even blink. She leaned forward, her voice steady, clear, and unshaken. "My difference," she said firmly. "I don't just talk about change, I fight for it, every single day. I've stood against billion-dollar corporations, I've battled in courtrooms, and I've drafted legislation that directly impacts working families. My record isn't about promises, it's about receipts. And I've got plenty. The audience gasped, and a few people shouted, "Yes," from the back rows. Social media feeds across the country lit up in real time, with live captions quoting her word for word. Crockett let the energy settle before adding the knockout line. "People don't need another politician who sounds good, they need someone who does good. And if that makes me stand out, then I'm proud of it." The reaction was electric. Cheers shook the studio walls, while Oprah's face tightened ever so slightly, as though realizing she had walked straight into Crockett's strongest ground. Oprah's eyes narrowed just slightly as she shuffled her cards. The audience could feel it, she was about to strike differently. Instead of policy or passion, she leaned into something more personal, her voice cutting with surgical precision. "Jasmine," Oprah said slowly, "your energy is undeniable. But some critics say you're more interested in building a brand than building bridges. That you thrive on conflict because it keeps the spotlight on you. So let me ask you directly, are you in this for the people, or are you in this for yourself?" The studio air thickened. It was a bold move, one that could make Crockett look selfish if she stumbled. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and the camera panned to Crockett, whose calm expression contrasted the tension in the room. She didn't rush. She let the silence hang until every eye was locked on her. Then she delivered her reply with razor clarity. "Oprah, with all respect, if I wanted to build a brand, there are 1,000 easier ways to do it. Politics is messy. It's brutal. And it doesn't reward honesty. But I chose this path because I refuse to sit back while others suffer." The audience began nodding, clapping lightly. But Crockett wasn't finished, her voice rose, sharp and commanding. "If conflict puts a spotlight on injustice, then let the lights shine as bright as they want. I didn't step into this arena for comfort or fame, I stepped in because silence helps the powerful, and my job is to help the people. That's the difference." The crowd erupted, louder than ever, some even chanting her name. The cameras caught Oprah leaning back, lips pressed together, as if reconsidering her next move. Crockett ended with a final line that lit up every social feed in seconds. "I don't need the spotlight, Oprah. I'll gladly hand it over, just as soon as the truth gets seen." The applause shook the studio, and for the first time, Oprah looked like she had been completely outmaneuvered. The noise from the crowd hadn't even settled when Oprah leaned forward again, determined not to let the moment slip fully out of her hands. She knew she had to push harder, to land something that would test Crockett's composure. Her voice lowered, carrying a pointed weight. "Jasmine," Oprah said, "you speak boldly about truth and accountability. But what about your critics who claim your style divides more than it unites? That instead of building coalitions, you're burning bridges? Isn't leadership about bringing people together, not pushing them apart?" The audience quieted instantly. It was a heavy question, one that had tripped up seasoned leaders before. If Crockett came across as combative now, Oprah might finally regain the edge. The cameras zoomed in on Crockett's face, every viewer at home waiting for her reaction. Crockett didn't flinch. She smiled, a slow, confident smile, and then spoke with the kind of clarity that seemed to slice through the tension. "Oprah, unity doesn't mean silence. Unity doesn't mean pretending everything is fine while people are hurting. Real unity comes from honesty, because you can't heal what you refuse to confront." The audience gasped and then roared in approval. Crockett's tone sharpened, her words flowing like she had been waiting for this very moment. "You don't build bridges by ignoring cracks in the foundation. You build them by calling out what's broken, and then fixing it together. If telling the truth is seen as divisive, then maybe the real problem isn't my words, it's the injustice hiding behind the silence." The crowd was on their feet again, thunderous applause filling the studio. Oprah blinked, visibly caught off guard for the second time. The camera panned between the two women, the queen of television momentarily silenced, and the congresswoman standing tall in her moment of triumph. Crockett finished with one line that spread like wildfire online within minutes. "Bridges built on lies collapse. I'd rather build on truth, and I'll take the heat for it every single time. The ovation shook the studio walls, and the look on Oprah's face told the world everything. She had underestimated Jasmine Crockett. Oprah took a slow breath, clearly feeling the weight of the moment. She wasn't used to being overshadowed on her own stage, and the audience could sense her frustration. Her tone shifted, still calm, but edged with urgency, as if she needed to reclaim authority. "Jasmine," Oprah pressed, "you've mastered powerful words, but words don't always fix problems. People at home want action, not speeches. Can you really deliver results, or is this just another performance?" The crowd murmured, some nodding, some gasping at the sharpness of the question. Oprah had just accused Crockett of playing to the cameras, a dangerous trap for any politician. But Crockett didn't stumble. Instead, she leaned in, her eyes locked directly on Oprah's. Her voice was calm, controlled, but carried the force of a hammer. "Oprah, with all due respect, performance is pretending things are fine when they're not. What I do isn't performance, it's persistence. I don't just talk on TV. I draft legislation. I fight in hearings. I hold those in power accountable, even when it's uncomfortable." The audience cheered, but Crockett wasn't done. She raised her hand slightly, silencing the noise, and delivered the line that froze the entire studio. "If you think this is a performance, then I'll tell you what, it's the kind of performance that puts food on tables, keeps roofs over families, and protects the rights too many are trying to take away. And if that makes it theater, then maybe the stage we're on is called democracy." The studio erupted. The applause was deafening, shaking the cameras as the crowd stood and clapped, some even chanting her name. Social media lit up instantly, clips spreading across platforms with captions like asterisk, "Crockett just ended the debate with one line." Asterisk. Oprah sat back in her chair, lips pressed together, visibly stunned for the third time. The queen of television had been silenced once again, and the audience knew they had just witnessed a viral showdown. The studio lights felt hotter now, and Oprah's trademark composure was beginning to show cracks. She shifted in her chair, tilting her head slightly, searching for a way to turn the tide. The audience leaned in, sensing that this was her last real chance to regain control of the conversation. With a measured but pointed tone, Oprah went in for what she hoped would be the final blow. "Jasmine," she said, "you're passionate, yes, but passion alone doesn't govern a nation. Critics say your fire could just as easily consume your own allies. Tell me, how can the public trust that your intensity won't become recklessness?" The air went still. Oprah had gone for the jugular, questioning not just Crockett's style but her very fitness to lead. The audience gasped quietly, waiting for the congresswoman's reply. Crockett let the silence hang. She didn't rush, didn't flinch. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on Oprah with laser focus, her voice low but commanding enough to cut through the tension. "Oprah, fire can destroy, but it can also light the way. The real danger isn't leaders with too much fire. It's leaders with no fire at all. Because without that fire, people stay cold, ignored, and forgotten." The crowd broke into applause, but Crockett raised her hand, keeping the floor. Her tone sharpened as she delivered the line that would ricochet across every headline and newsfeed by morning. "The public doesn't need someone who plays it safe while they suffer. They need someone willing to burn through the lies, the corruption, and the excuses. If my fire makes the powerful uncomfortable, good. That means it's working." The audience erupted, some chanting, "Crockett. Crockett," as cameras captured Oprah blinking in disbelief, her lips parting but no words coming out. For the first time in her legendary career, Oprah looked completely silenced on live television. The chants of "Crockett. Crockett" still echoed in the studio when the broadcast cut to commercial. But by then, the moment had already escaped the walls of the set and was exploding across the nation. Clips of Crockett's fiery response flooded social media within minutes. On Twitter, hashtags like #CrockettClapback and #OprahSilence trended worldwide. TikTok was flooded with edits, looping the line, "Fire can destroy, but it can also light the way, over dramatic music. On YouTube, live stream chats lit up as political commentators replayed the clip in real time. By the time the program returned from commercial, the entire internet had already declared Crockett the winner of the exchange. Memes poured in, side-by-side images of Oprah's stunned expression next to Crockett's fierce stare. Even news anchors who normally avoided picking sides admitted the exchange was one of the most stunning live TV moments in years. Meanwhile, outside the studio, watch parties and living rooms across the country buzzed with excitement. Some viewers cheered Crockett for standing her ground against one of the most powerful media figures in the world. Others admitted they had never seen Oprah so visibly rattled. Crockett, sitting calmly in her chair as the show resumed, seemed unfazed by the storm she had unleashed. Her phone, just off stage, was already blowing up with texts from allies, journalists, and supporters who recognized that she had just shifted the political conversation in real time. And though Oprah attempted to regain control, it no longer mattered, the narrative had already spun out of her hands. The viral clips weren't just trending, they were rewriting the story of the night. When the cameras came back from commercial, Oprah sat a little straighter, her smile carefully fixed. She was a professional, decades of live television had taught her how to recover. She welcomed viewers back warmly, her tone smooth as ever, but there was an unmistakable tension beneath her polished delivery. Before the break, Oprah began, "We had a spirited exchange. Let's reset for a moment. Representative Crockett, I think it's important for our audience to hear not just your fire, but your vision. Tell us, in concrete terms, where you want to take this country." It was a calculated move. Oprah was trying to steer the discussion back into safe territory, away from the viral flames of confrontation. A few audience members nodded, maybe this was Oprah's chance to calm the storm. But Crockett didn't just take the bait. She flipped it. "My vision," she said, leaning forward, her voice steady but forceful. "It's simple, a country where truth matters more than spin, where people's needs come before corporate profits, and where leaders don't get to hide behind polished words while failing to deliver." The crowd applauded, but Crockett wasn't done. She glanced directly at Oprah, her tone sharpening just enough to draw the line. "And let's be clear, what happened before the break wasn't just spirited. It was accountability. People are tired of watching the powerful dodge hard truths with soft language. My vision is a nation where no one, no matter how wealthy, how famous, or how influential, is above being challenged." The audience roared again, louder than before. Some stood, clapping, while others shouted, "That's right," from their seats. The cameras cut quickly to Oprah, who smiled tightly, but the flicker in her eyes told the story. Crockett had not only dodged the reset, she had turned it into another viral strike. Within minutes, new clips began to flood social media, Crockett to Oprah, no one is above being challenged. Commentators on live streams called it, a masterclass in flipping the narrative. The reset Oprah had hoped for had turned into yet another moment cementing Crockett's dominance on live TV. The cameras zoomed in closer now, the tension so thick the audience hardly breathed. Oprah's smile remained, but her eyes carried determination. This was her arena, her platform, and she wasn't about to let anyone walk away with the crown without a fight. "Jasmine," Oprah said firmly, her voice resonating through the studio, "you've proven you can speak with passion. But passion alone doesn't lead a country forward. At the end of the day, leadership is about results. So let me ask you plainly, what makes you think you are truly ready to lead on the national stage?" The audience shifted in their seats, this was the hardest question yet. Oprah had stripped away the debate to its rawest form, demanding Crockett prove her worth under the brightest lights. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then Crockett leaned forward, her presence commanding, her tone calm but filled with unshakable force. "What makes me ready? The same thing that makes every true leader ready. I don't run from hard truths, I face them. I don't bend to the powerful, I confront them. And I don't silence my fire to make others comfortable, I use it to fight for those who've been ignored too long." The audience clapped, but Crockett wasn't finished. She stood slightly from her chair, her eyes never leaving Oprah. Readiness isn't about fame, or fortune, or how many people you've had in your audience. Readiness is about resilience. And if there's one thing this country knows about me by now, it's that when I'm challenged, I don't crumble, I rise. The room erupted. The cheers were deafening, chants starting again as the studio stood to its feet. Even the production crew couldn't hide their grins as the sound thundered through the set. Oprah sat still, her lips pressed, visibly stunned once more. For all her decades of commanding interviews, she had met someone she couldn't shake, someone who turned every strike into a stronger counter. And then Crockett delivered the line that would define the night. "You asked if I'm ready, Oprah. I've been ready. The real question is, are the powerful ready for me?" The audience exploded, the studio shaking with applause so fierce it drowned out everything else. The viral moment was sealed. As the show wrapped and the cameras faded to black, the world outside the studio was already ablaze. Clips of the confrontation dominated every platform within minutes, overshadowing every other headline of the night. Cable networks replayed the exchange on a loop, their commentators nearly shouting over one another. Some praised Oprah for pressing tough questions, but most couldn't ignore what viewers had witnessed, Jasmine Crockett standing toe-to-toe with one of the most powerful figures in media and walking away stronger. On Twitter, hashtags like hashtag Crockett Clapback and hashtag Oprah Shocked surged into the global top trends. Political pundits who had dismissed Crockett as too fiery suddenly admitted she had seized the national spotlight. Late-night hosts cracked jokes about Oprah finally finding someone who could out-talk her, and the punchline was always Crockett's name. But it wasn't just the media. Politicians began weighing in. Allies applauded her courage, calling her the voice America didn't know it needed but can't ignore. Even opponents grudgingly admitted her performance was electrifying. Talk of a bigger role, perhaps even a run for higher office, sprouted almost instantly. Meanwhile, ordinary people lit up comment sections and forums. Viewers who had tuned in casually wrote things like, "I didn't know much about Jasmine Crockett before tonight, but I do now. She's the real deal." Others said Oprah had finally met her match. The showdown wasn't just a TV moment anymore, it was a political earthquake. Crockett's words, replayed endlessly online, weren't just clapbacks, they had become rallying cries. And Oprah? For the first time in decades, her silence was louder than her words. By the next morning, the firestorm was unstoppable. Every major outlet carried the headline in some form, Crockett silences Oprah on live TV. News tickers ran the replay of her closing line, "Are the powerful ready for me?" Like it was a national soundbite. When Jasmine Crockett finally appeared on camera again, it wasn't on a flashy stage but in a simple press gaggle outside the Capitol. Reporters swarmed her, microphones stretched in every direction, shouting questions about the viral clash. "Representative Crockett, did you mean to go toe-to-toe with Oprah? Do you think this changes your political future? Was that a preview of a national campaign?" Crockett smiled, not rattled by the chaos. Her voice was steady, almost casual, but her words carried the same power that had shaken the studio the night before. "Look, I didn't go there to fight with Oprah. I went there to tell the truth. And sometimes the truth isn't neat, it isn't polished, and it definitely isn't comfortable. But it's necessary. Always." The crowd of reporters buzzed, but Crockett wasn't finished. She leaned closer to the microphones, her tone sharpening with precision. "If people think standing my ground against a tough question is newsworthy, imagine how they'll feel when they see me standing my ground against billion-dollar corporations, against corruption, and against anyone who thinks the people's voice doesn't matter. Last night wasn't about me versus Oprah, it was about the truth versus silence. And the truth won." The statement spread instantly across social media. Clips of her calm press gaggle added fuel to the already raging storm. Commentators called it a second knockout in less than 24 hours. Even critics admitted she had handled the aftermath flawlessly, refusing to gloat while still owning the narrative. By afternoon, #Crockett 2028 began trending, as supporters speculated about what her future might hold. What had begun as an interview had transformed into a full-blown political movement. For nearly 24 hours, Oprah had remained silent. The internet filled the void with speculation. Some said she was embarrassed, others claimed she was strategizing her response. Headlines screamed, "Where's Oprah?" Crockett owns the narrative. Finally, that evening, Oprah addressed the moment on her own social media platform with a short video. Sitting in her trademark armchair, she looked calm but deliberate, her tone serious. "I've spent decades giving people a platform to speak," she began. Last night was no different. Jasmine Crockett brought her voice, her passion, and yes, her fire. While I may not agree with every word, I respect her conviction. That's what my stage has always been about, voices that challenge us, even if they challenge me. It was meant to sound gracious, but viewers caught the subtle undertone. Oprah was positioning herself as magnanimous, above the fray, subtly reclaiming control. Within minutes, her video trended, with supporters praising her classy response. But Crockett didn't let it sit uncontested. Just hours later, during an impromptu town hall streamed live online, she responded without hesitation. "Oprah said she gave me a platform," Crockett told the crowd. "But with all due respect, I don't need anyone to give me a platform. The people are my platform. I don't speak because someone hands me a microphone, I speak because millions of voices are tired of being ignored. And that's bigger than any show." The room erupted, chants echoing off the walls. Clips of her statement instantly dominated the internet. Hashtags like #the people are my platform skyrocketed to the top of trending lists. Oprah's attempt to reframe the moment had backfired. Instead of closing the story, she had reignited it, giving Crockett yet another viral strike. By the next morning, the frenzy had reached a boiling point. News outlets weren't just replaying the confrontation anymore, they were dissecting it frame by frame. Panels of pundits debated whether Oprah had lost control of her own stage, while others declared that Jasmine Crockett had officially graduated to national contender. Everywhere, Crockett's words echoed like a drumbeat, "the people are my platform." Commentators called it the kind of phrase that becomes a slogan, the kind of line that rallies a movement. On talk radio, callers lit up the lines, praising her fearlessness. "She didn't just stand up to Oprah, she stood up for all of us," one caller said, his voice trembling with excitement. Even skeptical voices admitted they couldn't remember the last time a politician had sparked this much raw energy in the public. Late-night comedians turned the clash into monologues, replaying Oprah's stunned expressions alongside Crockett's fiery one-liners. The clips went viral on TikTok, remixed with music, edits, and captions like, "when Oprah met her match." Meanwhile, the political world was on fire. Allies began rallying behind Crockett publicly, urging her to seize the moment. Donors called her team non-stop. A few even suggested she had the spark of a national leader. Through it all, Crockett stayed poised. She didn't gloat, didn't lash out, she kept reinforcing the same message: this wasn't about her versus Oprah, it was about truth versus silence. That restraint only made her look stronger, more disciplined, and more ready. Oprah, for all her power, now seemed locked in a narrative she couldn't control. Every attempt to reframe the clash only added oxygen to Crockett's fire. It was no longer just a viral moment, it was the making of a legacy. The frenzy reached its crescendo within days. What began as a tense exchange on live television had transformed into one of the most talked-about political moments in recent memory. Everywhere, the clip of Jasmine Crockett standing firm against Oprah played on repeat, her words etched into headlines, her stare turned into a symbol. But Crockett didn't let the moment fade into spectacle. She harnessed it. At her next major rally, crowds gathered in record numbers, holding signs that read, truth over silence, and asterisk, the people are my platform. Asterisk, the atmosphere felt less like a rally and more like a movement. When she took the stage, Crockett didn't mention Oprah by name. She didn't need to. Instead, she looked out over the roaring crowd and spoke directly to the heart of the moment. Some people thought last week was about me versus a television icon, she said, her voice echoing through the arena. But it was never about that. It was about this country's hunger for truth. It was about reminding the powerful that the people cannot be silenced. Not by money, not by fame, and not by fear. The crowd roared, chants breaking out louder than ever. Crockett raised her hand, letting the noise swell, then cut it with a line that would define her career. This isn't the end of a debate, it's the beginning of a fight. And I promise you this, I won't stop until every voice in this nation is heard. The eruption that followed shook the venue to its core. News anchors would later describe it as the moment Crockett stepped from rising figure to undeniable force. Social media crowned her the winner not just of a clash, but of a cultural shift. And Oprah? Her silence after that rally spoke volumes. The story was no longer hers, it belonged to Jasmine Crockett. The clash that began as a heated TV moment had become something far greater, the turning point that launched a new chapter in American politics.